All right, let's get into it. We're about to unpack one of the most disturbing and frankly complex stories of our time, the case of Jeffrey Epstein. This was a guy with unimaginable wealth and power, constantly surrounded by the global elite. But behind that shiny, glamorous facade was a reality far darker than most of us could ever imagine.
And it's a fair question, right? I mean, the man is gone, his main partner in crime is locked up. So why does this story still have such a powerful grip on us? Why does it feel like even now we're only just scratching the surface of what really happened?
Well, the answer is pretty simple. We've never gotten the full story. For years, everything we knew was just the tip of a very, very large iceberg. But now, with a whole bunch of court files being unsealed, new names and new details are coming to light, and we're finally starting to see the true, shocking scale of his twisted empire.
To really wrap your head around this whole thing, you first have to understand the central paradox of Jeffrey Epstein. You see, he lived two completely different lives, and he was a master at using one to hide the other.
I mean, just look at this disconnect. It's staggering. On the one hand, you have the public image he spent millions to create, the brilliant self-made financier, the generous philanthropist, the guy who hung out with presidents and princes. And on the other hand, the hidden reality, a monstrous predator running a sophisticated international trafficking ring. And that public image? It wasn't just a mask, it was his shield. It was his greatest weapon.
So, this is the big question, right? How does a middle-class kid from Coney Island, a college dropout no less, become this untouchable billionaire? Well, his rise to the top was just as mysterious as it was fast, and it was built on a pattern of using powerful connections and somehow always evading the consequences. This career path is just wild. He drops out of college but lands a teaching job at one of the most elite schools in the country. He uses the connections he makes there to get a job at Bear Stearns, then leaves right when an investigation starts. Then he goes to work for a company that turns out to be a massive Ponzi scheme. And every single time he just walks away, not only unharmed, but richer. It's like he failed his way to the top. And if you want some perspective on the kind of money he was around, get this, $25,000 a month. That was his salary way back in 1987, just for consulting for that Ponzi scheme. Now, the guy who ran that firm eventually went to prison for 20 years. Epstein, who was called an equal partner in court documents, he faced no charges at all. Nothing.
You know, there's that famous quote, and man, does it feel like it was written specifically for Jeffrey Epstein. But here's the thing. In his case, the financial crimes, as huge as they were just the foundation. They were just the tools that gave him the money and the power to do things that were infinitely, infinitely darker.
Okay, so now we have to talk about the core of his criminal enterprise. And this is crucial. This was not one guy acting alone. Not even close. This was an organized, systematic operation, and it absolutely depended on a key partner who made the whole thing possible.
Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. They were, in the worst possible way, a perfect team. He had the money and the monstrous desires, but he was socially awkward. He didn't quite fit in. She had the high society status, the connections, the polish that he was missing. Think of it this way. He was the predator, but she was the recruiter. She used her credibility and her little black book to lure victims in. Their partnership was the engine that powered this whole horrific machine.
And they ran it like a business, which is just so chilling. It would start with an offer of cash for a so-called massage, but then it became a twisted kind of pyramid scheme, where victims themselves were paid to bring in their friends. It created this constant, sustainable supply of new girls. And from there, the most vulnerable were isolated, flown on his private jet to his secluded estates, far away from anyone who could possibly help them.
And the absolute epicenter of it all was this place, Little St. James, a private island that became infamously known as Epstein Island. He bought it in 1998 and turned it into his own personal kingdom, a place totally cut off from the outside world, where he had total control and could act with total impunity.
Now, these crimes went on for years and years, but when law enforcement finally started to close in, Epstein's real power, his influence, was put to the ultimate test. And the result was one of the most outrageous legal deals in modern American history. Okay, let's walk through this, because it's just unbelievable. The FBI has him dead to rights. They have a case with dozens of victims. We're talking enough to put him away for life. But then, his dream team of lawyers secretly cut a deal with the U.S. Attorney's Office. And poof, all the serious federal charges just vanish. The victims aren't even told about it. In the end, he served just 13 months, and for most of that, he got to leave the jail every day for work release. It was a total sham.
And it wasn't just the public that was outraged. A court later condemned the deal, saying it violated the victims' rights. Today, it's seen as this catastrophic failure of the justice system. It's basically proof that for men with Epstein's kind of power and money, there's just a completely different set of rules.
So for a decade, it really seemed like he'd gotten away with it. He went right back to his parties, his private jets, his whole lavish lifestyle. But the story wasn't over yet, because the voices of his victims, amplified by some incredibly tenacious journalists, were about to bring him down for good.
The real turning point came in 2018. The Miami Herald published a series called Perversion of Justice that laid out the whole corrupt 2008 plea deal in painstaking detail, and public outrage just exploded. A year later, bam, he's arrested on new federal charges. And then, just over a month after that, he was found dead in his jail cell.
And of course, his death is just as controversial as his life was. The official story is that it was a suicide, but given the sheer number of incredibly powerful people whose secrets he knew, a lot of people immediately suspected he was silenced, killed to make sure those secrets stayed buried forever. It's a question that, for many, has never really been answered.
Which brings us right back to today. Epstein is dead, Maxwell is in prison. But the biggest questions of all are still just hanging in the air. Who else was involved in all this, and what else do we still not know?
Now, these documents that were just released, they are a huge deal, but, and this is a really important but, we have to remember that they're just a tiny fraction of the total evidence. We are still looking at a heavily censored, incomplete picture of his crimes. So when you see this list of famous names from the files, Prince Andrew, Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, even Stephen Hawking, it is absolutely critical to have context. Being mentioned in these documents is not the same as being accused of a crime. For many, the connection was as simple as flying on his jet or going to a party. For others, like Prince Andrew, the accusations were much more direct and led to a massive legal settlement. The point of this list isn't to say they're all guilty. It's to show the unbelievable breadth of his network.
And that leaves us with the final, chilling question. After all of the investigations, all the journalism, all these unsealed files, this is the stuff that has managed to bubble to the surface. So it makes you wonder, what else is still buried? What secrets were so powerful they could protect a monster like him for decades? And what secrets ultimately died with him in that jail cell? That is the mystery that continues to haunt this entire saga.